Well, I'm noticing that our recent overseeding of our fescue is starting to germinate, and if you look closely you can see some of the new leaf blades starting to pop through, and that's a real good sign for us. Now remember, our fescue is really pretty much established, but we overseed it each year to keep it thicker to help smother out some of the weeds. And this year we used a blend of fescue that had several cultivars in it just so we can get some disease tolerance from some of the brown patch diseases later on in the summer of next year. Now, if you've not overseeded your fescue yet, you're probably still going to be okay, but I would try to get it done just as soon as possible. And remember, the rate for fescue overseeding is 3 to 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet. If you're going to put in a new lawn of fescue, you usually increase that rate to 6 to 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet so you can get a little bit thicker. And if you wait too much longer, you'll really need to wait just probably until next March, late February, depending on how the season warms up again for us. Because if it gets too cold, the seed won't really germinate and can freeze out if we get a hard cold spell. The other thing to keep in mind when managing your fescue lawn is to start lowering the mowing height of the lawnmower. During the summertime, when the fescue's heat stressed, we usually mow it a little bit higher. Sometimes that can be 2.5, 3, even as much as 4 inches high. But once it's actively growing, we're getting some moisture and it's cooler at its peak time, lower the mowing height around 1.5 to 2.5 inches, and that way you'll get a little bit closer. Plus this new grass that's starting to pop up, that will help top that off and make it kind of clump out on you a little bit more as well. The other thing is with fescue, if you pay attention to it, you'll notice that you're starting to get some of the broadleaf winter weeds coming up in it too, and that's very obvious over here in one of our perennial small fruit beds. If you look closely, you can see some henbit. We've even got some dandelions popping up already, so those are cool season winter weeds, and they start growing about the same time that the fescue perks up. But really, most of us don't pay attention to the cool season winter weeds until next spring, when they're more aggressive, they're reached maturity, and they're really a lot more of a nuisance at that time. So if you're going to try to control some of these winter weeds, really now is a better time versus waiting in next spring when they're too mature. One thing that most people do, of course, is use herbicides. And I know some of you watching don't really like to hear us talk about herbicides, and that's okay. One of the things that I would encourage those of you who don't like to use herbicides is continue to get your grass thick, manage it properly, and if you get it thick enough, usually you don't have weed problems and you really shouldn't even need to use herbicides. But there's some instances from stress or where the grass has died or even establishing new lawns that herbicides play a role. When you get the weeds up and growing like the dandelion and the henbit and things that have already germinated, usually you use what is called a Postemergence herbicide. And probably the most common one that's used is like 2,4-D, MCPP, and dicamba. Those have been around for several years. They're for broadleaf weeds once they've already started growing. Last year, though, there was a new herbicide introduced called Confront. And Confront's active ingredient is triclopyr, and it's actually a new one that gives us a little bit different alternative control for broadleaf weeds. So that's real exciting. But even more exciting, I think, to me is the fact that now we have a Preemergence herbicide for broadleaf weeds, and here I have a bag of it called Portrait. And again, it's a broadleaf weed preventer, and you can see that includes dandelion and henbit, chickweed, spurge, clovers, the oxalis. And those are all weeds that grow during the winter time usually, some during the summer, but mostly during the winter. And you can actually put the herbicide down as a granular, and it puts a barrier down on the ground and it prevents those weeds from growing up through them. Now obviously, if I'm already pointing out weeds that are germinating, that means it's a little bit too late in many cases. But also some of those will continue to germinate as long as the weather's right here in the next few weeks. So in many instances you can still put it on and get some control, and even sometimes next spring. But that's again very exciting. Now obviously, with them being new products, they're pretty expensive, so you really want to read the label, follow the directions, don't put on more than you need to, and also look to make sure your type of grass, whether it's Bermuda or fescue, is on the label, And also some of them cannot be used on newly established lawns because obviously it might affect some of the grass germinating too. So just read the label, it's very important to do so. Now if I had one last pointer to tell you about grass and mowing and things during the wintertime, it would be when we turned our lawnmower and our other small engines. If you're not going to be using them anymore, the best thing to do is drain the gasoline from them. The number one problem on these small engines next spring is people leave the gas in, the gas oxidizes, you get a gumminess built up, and they won't start on you. So drain them if at all possible. If you're going to use it occasionally during the winter, you've probably heard of a product called Stable. Stable is a product that you can mix in with the gas, and it actually keeps you from having to drain it, and it helps prevent the buildup of gumminess and all those things that help clog up the mower basically. And it seems like there's a lot of publicity on it this year. We've known about it for several years, so there's some options there, but just something real easy to do this time of year to help really avoid any problems next spring. So try to get those last minute touches on your turf and on your equipment because winter is just around the corner.